In the world of politics and the rock and roll show that we've had here today, does it seem like weeks or months that Ontario has had their election? And no, it was only last Thursday. And I have the pleasure of introducing you tonight to a MUN political science student. Her name is McLean, and she is in Ontario. I believe she helped out on the campaign up there, and we're going to have a little chat with her to find out how it all shook out in Ontario. She's on line too. Cara, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Wow, did you catch any of Fred Hutton there?
I did. That was very interesting.
It's hard enough to keep up. Now you're trying to keep up on the news of two provinces, Cara, and if Ontario was changing as fast as Newfoundland, which it had been for the last 40 days leading up to this election, it must be a full-time job for you.
Oh, yeah, it's hard to keep up with both of them at the same time, but it's pretty interesting.
Cara, tell us, for the people who don't know, tell us what shook out in the election in Ontario last Thursday night.
Well, the Liberal Party won a majority, which means they're going to stay in power. They've been in power for more than a decade now. They're now in a majority situation, so I guess Kathleen Wynne has finally won her mandate, and she'll be leading the province for another 4 years.
Now, there was two separate polls that I know I mentioned on the last Thursday show. One showed everybody neck and neck, and one showed a 19-point spread between the three candidates, which would be Kathleen Wynne, Tim Hudak, and Andrea Horwath. And so, how shocked were you when the final number shook out?
I don't know that I was shocked. I mean, I think we typically know with polling that they're more so looking at the horse race more than the actual numbers. Again, the sample sizes were all very small. As a political science student, I guess I've been trained well at MUN to be very critical of the polling that I saw. However, there was a poll that came out, I think 2 days before Election Day, that showed everybody was in, I think, within 3 points of each other. Yes. So that made things interesting and exciting going into Election Day. But, I mean, I'm not one to trust polls, but the results were surprising. Kathleen Wynne really won a mandate, majority government, after dealing with minorities with Alton McGuinty for 3 years.
And, of course, the ultimate problem with polls is that if 80% of the people were actually going to their polling stations and marking their X, polls would seem to be a lot more accurate. It would seem that half the population has no problem with answering a poll and telling who they're going to vote for, but the chances of them getting in a car and actually doing it is 1 out of 2.
Yeah, and I mean, very few people have cell phones these days. It's hard to get a hold of them. I mean, I know working on a campaign, it's almost impossible to get a hold of the electors on our side of things. So, I mean, obviously the sample is probably not representative.
Yeah, you must. That's a very interesting point, because I mean, if you're mainly reaching out to people on landline, it's very likely that you're hardly ever talking to someone beneath the age of 55.
Very true, very true.
So now you did work on one of the campaigns, and how was that?
Oh, it was very exciting, as usual. I think what we saw in Ontario was more so a referendum on fiscal conservatism and less so sort of an election on the three leaders. The progressive conservative candidate, Tim Hudak, started his campaign off by saying he was going to create 1 million jobs by firing 100,000 people. And I don't know that that's the best strategy in terms of getting votes, but what it certainly did was got all the unions and third-party people involved. And all I heard on the radio during the campaign was, advertisements from unions and from third-party advertisers saying, Tim Hudak is going to cut teachers, he's going to cut frontline workers. And I would be interested to know if maybe he didn't open with such a drastic fiscal conservative message, how he would have done. I think it would have been very different.
It definitely when the election was called, he was in a much better position than he was after that comment. Everybody just jumped on that comment, and it just dogged him right through the entire election, to the point where he was put up as the candidate who was not believable, because look what he says he's going to do.
No, yeah, and I think we saw the same thing from him in 2011, actually. Those of us who maybe fall on the more left side of the spectrum with Tim Hudak always just think, well, just let him talk, and eventually he's going to say something that's going to push voters away. And again, we saw that again this time with something very drastic.
So do you think that you said it was about moving away from the policy of Tim Hudak as opposed to but Kathleen Wynne must have really impressed a lot of people in her ability to lead in order to get the amount of seats she did.
See, and I'm not sure that I actually think that happened. What I saw on the ground and what I heard on the radio is that it was more of a stop Hudak movement, and so people would decide who they would vote for based on who was the Conservative candidate. So I mean, in some Toronto ridings, people voted Liberal instead of NDP. Some hardline New Democrats lost their jobs because of strategic voting, and I think we saw that across the province, which is very interesting. And that's why I sort of think it was more so a referendum on fiscal conservatism and less so actually about Kathleen Wynne.
And often when there's strategic voting, it's the New Democrats who usually end up feeling the brunt of the pain, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think what's interesting with the New Democrats is that lost 3 major seats in Toronto, however picked up 3 seats in southwestern Ontario that they hadn't previously held. So, I mean, you end up with the same amount of seats you had going in a very different area. So I think it's going to be interesting how this plays out. And
the unions weren't too happy with Andrea Horwath either, though, were they?
Well, I mean, some of them weren't, but actually a lot of them felt that Kathleen Wynne, following that Drummond report, that we would probably see cuts to the public sector. Mm-hmm. So I know Smokey Thomas, the union leader of OPSU, was very, very in support of bringing down that budget. There were some that were against, but actually what we saw was most unions rolling in line with more of a Stop Hudak movement and not really going with either the Liberals or the New Democrats.
Do you think there's a message here for the federal government from this election?
I guess on a personal note, I can say I hope so. But I don't know that there is. I mean, it was really odd. I don't know many people who campaign on cutting 100,000 public service jobs because we know the implications that has on private jobs and on the economy.
That usually comes after the election.
Yeah. It was a very interesting tactical choice, and I think we've seen the consequences of it.
Yeah. Now, Cara, listen, you're finished your degree? Are you coming back to study another year next year?
No, I'm just at home writing my thesis.
Oh, so you're done with studying in Newfoundland?
Yes.
Just the thesis. What are you writing your thesis on?
It's a mouthful.
Oh, it always is. That's what I like to ask.
Yeah, the impact of the American evangelical movement on domestic policy in Uganda.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. Good luck with that, Cara. And listen, if anything comes up, I may call out to you. I really enjoyed having this chat with you tonight, and I may reach out to you again. You're a great talking head. You know exactly what you're talking about. You're living the political process, be it on a volunteer basis and studying it, and it's been a pleasure to talk with you tonight.
It's been really great to talk with you, and I hope I'll hear from you again.
Guaranteed. Thanks a lot, Cara.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. That is master's student Cara McLean writing a thesis.